We are continuing with our work of ensuring that there is inclusion for women, for young people, for Africa. So in Abu Dhabi, we had taken designers from the continent, east, west, north, south, as well as including some of the designers from UAE and America, and showcasing them at the Forbes International Women's Day celebrations in Abu Dhabi.
Well, these events comes at a very critical time, the war in Ukraine, but women are still trying very hard to ensure that they take their rightful place on the backdrop of the COVID-19 as well. And how has the pandemic affected your work or the foundation's work?
Sophie, I'm so happy that you mentioned that all this celebration happens on the back of wars, climate change issues, COVID, and we know from the COVID pandemic, people that were most impacted by the COVID pandemic were women. 1 in every 4 young girls in South Africa lost a job during the pandemic. And we have unemployment that has affected women who work as domestic workers, women in the retail business, and women in general who have had to go back home to be the caregivers. So with this event, the International Women's Day today, we are hoping to raise awareness around issues of inclusion. Often when we look at economies, we focus on GDP only, but we want to make sure that we can get policymakers to also focus on economic growth and how that impacts on society in general, particularly affecting the poor and the marginalized. Today we have, as you mentioned, Secretary General Fatma Samora. We want to talk to her about how inclusive sports in general and football in particular is around women. We will also be talking to several speakers from the fall looking at inclusion of women in the sciences with the fourth industrial revolution to ensure that we leave no one behind. It is, I think, for me, very important, and for the foundation, as part of our development agenda, focusing particularly on the poor and the vulnerable, that we make sure that inclusivity is at the center of the work that we do, and the impact that economic growth, for instance, has on women, on young people, and people in rural communities, the poor, the marginalized. That is the focus of the Motsepe Foundation.
And finally, your message to women around the world who are watching what's happening in Ukraine, particularly when you look at women and children.
It is really heartbreaking when you look at the impact of, crises around the world. We saw that firsthand with COVID, the crises that women had gone through. We saw it recently with migrations when young children were lost at sea, drowning, women carrying babies on trees. The impact of crises such as war and, famine, pandemics, bears heavily on women and children. And I'd like to say to women out there, pray for the women who are going through challenges in Ukraine. Be with them. Do whatever you can within your society, within your community.